and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. June the 12th each year is now celebrated as Nigeria's Democracy Day, a date highly significant in all ramifications as it calls to mind the country's romance with the concept of democracy, a government of the people, by the people and for the people, and a time when it seemed we almost got it right, at least with the conduct of the polls. But all that effort became a wasted dream, at least so it seemed, until recently when it would seem that that dream was revived and set as the standard we now strive for in our new experiment in government, an experiment we've been conducting since 1999. 21 years after, how have we fared? Is it utopic to speak of or seek an ideal democracy? Or is every democracy homegrown, fitting the needs of its people as the situation arises? Tonight on Hard Copy, I invite you all to take a moment to reflect on the system of government we currently practice. If you were to make it perfect, what would you add? What would you remove? I wait to hear from you in our mailbox. In the meantime, we have a guest, Mr. Festus Kayemo, a senior advocate of Nigeria and Minister of State for Labor and Employment, gets to share his thoughts on our journey so far, having been there in the clamor for a return to democracy, joining in that clamor, engaging the government while in opposition, as well as approaching the courts when he felt things had gone wrong, and now in government as minister. Festus Kayemo, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's quite a lot to chew on, and I do hope that you've had some time to reflect on it. I was but a child when the clamor for democracy began. I think at that time you had just been called to bar.
Absolutely.
In 1993 when we went to the polls for the June 12 elections. And I think at some point we all imagined in the military era that democracy was some El Dorado, which we all were clamoring for at that point in time. But now we've been told is a journey. I don't know. What did you imagine, or did you imagine that our journey in democracy was going to be this torturous?
Well, I think that we just wanted to take one at a time. We didn't want to bother ourselves with how we are going to work on our democracy. You can't put the cart before the horse. The horse has to come before the cart. So we just wanted the military to go out first. The military was trying to teach us about democracy. Babangida especially was trying to, teach us how to practice democracy. He set so many rules, he canceled the rules, he set so many processes in place, he canceled the processes himself. In fact, he was the, ultimate arbiter. He felt at some point that the politicians were not behaving themselves, so he disqualified 23 aspirants at some point. You remember, that was when Yaradua and others were, the senior Yaradua was, they were disqualified, and they now set the rules again. And that was when, the two parties emerged, and Abiola and so forth. So they were trying to teach us about democracy. And at the point, our anger then was that, look, don't teach us about democracy. Just leave. Don't teach us how to behave. Leave. And when we get there, we will cross, the bridge. And so that was what happened. We thought very less then about how the journey was going to be. We just felt we needed to arrive there. But then guess what?
Yes.
Guess what? I think it was only the foolish that would have thought then that democracy was going to be just a one cure, for all our problems.
I'm wondering, why do you think that democracy was very important to us?
It's just to hear the voice of the people. Military intervention was then, at the point, was an anathema all over the world. It wasn't because we completely unacceptable.
It wasn't because we sought development.
No, it was just that we just wanted to hear the voices of Nigerians. And all over the world, too, democracy was now becoming, the fashionable thing. Okay? Yes, there are so many countries all over the world that had good development with dictatorship. But we didn't care at that point. We just felt that, look, freedom is more important than for example, what they call a pleasure. Freedom is more important than pleasure. If you keep somebody in a room, for instance, if you keep somebody in a room, for instance, and you give him everything he wants, but he should not tell him not to go out. And that's why prisons in places like Norway, good prisons all over the world, they are still not, pleasurable. You give them everything you want, feed them 3 times a day, have access to the internet, everything, and you say, don't go out here for 3 years, the person will die. The person would rather die. So if you give the person the option to say, look, you can go out of this room, you may not have the same pleasure you have when you're in this room, but you have the right to go out, to speak your mind, to travel anywhere you want. I guess 99% of people will say, look, I want to go out. I don't want a pleasure in prison. So when you say you want development...
the concept of democracy was very important to us because of freedom. But, some people will also recall the fact that every time there was a coup, the people, it would seem, rejoiced. And it would seem that they were waiting for development to come with that coup. That there was some joy. I don't know if you recollect, but, I mean, from what I have been told and from what I have read...
At some point, we ran out of that. We ran out of all those,
But it was there.
At some point, and perhaps you always have, when there's a change, you always have jubilation from those who felt they had lost out in the system. Even today, if you have a military coup today, in some part of the country that don't like the present government, they will come out of the street jubilating. But that is not the voice of the people. The loudest is not necessarily the majority. The loudest is not the majority.
So it's not so much that
at every point in time, you have governments that you have people who voted against that government. At every point in time. So those people will always be happy to see the back of that government anyway. But then the reality will always set in. Will always set in after their government exits, and then you ask yourself, say, hey, so what do we have in place? At the end of the day, all governments of the world, you have your period of what they call grace, your period of romance with the people, your period of what they call it. Once that period is over, reality sets in, and the people begin to ask hard questions all over the world.
Well, from your own assessment, 22 years down the line, I mean, this is about the longest we have practiced and experimented, and I choose that word, experiment, with this form of government. Well, it was what we clamored for, it's what we have. But a number of people will say that we are far from the ideal of democracy, the ideal democracy. First, do you agree that there is an ideal form of democracy, or do you think that every democracy is homegrown? Where do you think that Nigeria's democracy lies between an ideal and, say, a homegrown democracy?
Well, I think that's where I'll use your cliche again. It's a journey. I don't think it's an ideal democracy. You'll see what happened recently in America. I mean, it just brought it brought it home to us starkly that there is no perfect democracy. With all the America that we looked up to and all their years of democracy, it almost crumbled recently. And they just saw that certain of their process, people began to even question certain processes in the electoral, structure of America. People began to question the issue of how do you award, electoral votes to different states? Is that democratic enough? How the fact that somebody has
electoral college.
Electoral college, I mean, how does it work that after somebody has won a popular vote, you still have to now calculate electoral college votes? And the person may still lose even if he wins the popular vote. People began to question all of this in the American, system. How does it happen too that after somebody has also won the electoral college, it also has to be certified again by some kind of parliament? So that is unique to them. It's unique to that system. And I think it is time we also begin to look at our own system and see how it can satisfy us, how we can develop a homegrown democracy or a system that can stabilize our democracy. I'll speak from the top of my head here. Not as a Minister of Labour, not as a member of APC, but as Kayemo, I'll speak. And I think that we need to begin to see how we can bring all the different regions. First of all, we have to do proper, zoning, because I don't think the zones are properly placed as they are now. You can have some Igbo-speaking people in South-South. They're not in Southeast. You have some Igbo-speaking in North-Central. That we need to do proper zoning to put the autochthonous people in their different zones and allow them to have their voices. And then, perhaps, give them a sense of belonging to the whole Fed. If we cannot restructure quickly, perhaps we should toy with rotational presidency. Single-term rotational presidency, so that every part of the country will know, and that at a point I can aspire to the highest office. I'll be given my chance to prove my worth, and I can, rule this country. So something like that, like I said, it's not perfect. It's not in the straitjacket, but I'm thinking from the top of my head now as an individual that perhaps we begin to think about all of this to make this whole tension calm down about access to power, access to the center. We need to begin to think about it. Something to satisfy us so that you won't say that, oh no, in America it is practiced like this. They have their own unique system, unique history, unique environment.
Indeed. I mean, we agree that the American system is democratic. It's a democracy they're practicing there. In the UK...
In their context.
Yes. In the UK, they have a different system.
Exactly.
It's a democracy nonetheless.
Absolutely.
In many European countries, they have their own methods of practicing.
In Germany, look at the way,
They have their own methods. But
yes.
in all of it, we know that there are common elements that bind whatever it is that identifies itself as a democracy. The routine election of leaders
periodic elections
is one of them. We know that the rule of law is another one. We know that the active participation of citizens in civic space is another one. Now, if we were to go by these parameters, how far off would you say we were off the mark of a democracy?
Well, I think that it is the copycat system that has affected us, the copycats, to say that, look, we just want to import wholesale into Nigeria some models in other parts of the world. I think that we are in pole position as it is now to begin to develop our own system. That is why this whole debate about constitutional amendments, alteration and all that, well, it's very important. So that people who felt that, well, perhaps their voices were not heard enough in drafting the Constitution, their inputs were not taken, they have the opportunity to do so now. And so we can begin to now develop our own autonomous system. You
say it's a copycat system that has affected us? So.
Yes, because in 1963, all we did was to import the British system. It didn't work. In 1979, we went and imported the American system, presidential system. That's what we did. Look at the Constitution of 1999, of 1979.
Is it really the copycat system or a lack of will to truly implement what it is that we have copied? I mean, is there anything in
what I mean is that implementation is a different thing. You are going to a different argument. What I mean, first of all, is that what we tried to do, we didn't sit down to say what are our unique circumstances here and develop something to take care of those unique circumstances. We did not do that.
What do you think is unique to us that has made it difficult for us?
For instance, you don't have this type of multi-plural, plural society we have in America in terms of people who are holding to their original, cleavages and nations. They call themselves original nations. America did not develop like that. Britain did not develop like that. That's our unique experience. And then we have people we don't have a lingua franca, as it were, that is a traditional language. English is the traditional language of the British people, and it is spoken everywhere. But what we did, this is a foreign language we speak as lingua franca because we cannot adopt Hausa, Yoruba, or Igbo as the case may be. We're just bound together. So we have different nations here. We don't have one language of a native language that everybody speaks here.
Some people argue that now we do. Maybe Pidgin is something that we should look at.
Pidgin is also an offshoot of the English language.
It's a corruption of the English language, but
it can be developed.
It is.
It's being developed, and I think lexicographers are looking at that now.
Nonetheless, imperfect as, copycat, because some people will say there's nothing wrong with copying. It's the intention with which you copy, one, and then two, the fact that, we copied. If something has been done before and it's working, why do you have to sit down and try and find out your own when you can copy and adopt to your own typical situation? What's wrong with that?
Let me tell you why it was even not right to just copy, and why your assumption is even wrong. Because the Second Republic collapsed in 1983. It collapsed.
We're not the ones that we invented the term reinventing the wheel. That there's no need to reinvent the wheel.
Hold on, it collapsed. With the 1979 Constitution, it collapsed. That was a constitution that was being practiced. But then we came back in 1999, we adopted almost that constitution. It
collapsed because there was a coup.
Yes, but it was because the people felt that the system was not working, and they attributed it to the Constitution.
Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Festus Kayemo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Minister of State, Labour and Employment, is our guest tonight, and we're reflecting on our democratic journey so far. Let me bring you up, now that we're talking about the Constitution. Even that same Constitution, you have had cause to go to court on more than one occasion to challenge government to say, hey, even this Constitution, you are not following. You took a president to court to say, no, you have to, this is what the Constitution prescribes. One of them, I remember, with the appointments of service chiefs. So absolutely. Would you say that we have truly looked into this Constitution to implement even what it says in its own letters? I mean, it was only after that has now become routine that presidents now send names to the National Assembly for it to be confirmed. So isn't it a matter of not copying wholly and, you know, understanding what it is we have copied, rather than blaming it on the fact that we copied at all?
So when you say, I like the argument, the way you are drifting now, you are coming to a point now where you are perhaps also thinking like we are thinking now, that perhaps it's not the letters of the Constitution that are failing. It's not the letters that are failing, it's the operators of the Constitution that are failing. They are not ready to follow the spirit and letters of the Constitution.
Would you agree with that?
Oh yes, that is it. That's a problem. So when people trumpet it all the time that the Constitution has failed, the Constitution has failed, no, it's the operators that have refused to follow the provisions of the Constitution. So even if they go back to the people of Nigeria now in a referendum or anywhere, and they bring a brand new Constitution, you still need the same Nigerians, these same people to operate it. You still need them to operate it.
You know why I chuckle? Because so, I remember only recently the president was speaking to a group of people, and he was talking about, you know, why it is that he's come under so much criticism that hasn't he implemented the Constitution. Yes. And you just said something about the operators, you know, failing in implementing the Constitution.
Absolutely. The operators are not just the president alone. It's all the way down. In fact, give one example, for instance. It's extremely laughable and outrageous that the same governors who are always blaming the president are always trying to, you know, protect their space as state governors. No, federal government, you can't do this for us, you can't dictate to us, and all that. They are the same people that have killed the local government system. These same governors. It's very laughable. They have just refused the local government to work. And you heard from the president and commander-in-chief, no other person, so it's not rumor again, that a state governor will call a local government chairman and say, look, sign that you are receiving 300 million now. Because they are thugs and they are boys, because there's no election takes place in local governments now. They just put them and write results. The person will be so happy to sign that he received 300 million on a monthly basis, but they actually give him 100 million to go and pay workers and all that. And then that's the end. The state governor takes the 200 million. And but the local government chairman has signed that he collected 300 million. I want to ask you a question. Can you imagine that every month at FAC, when they come and take their monies, the state, that kind of thing can never happen? Can the president ever try that kind of nonsense with any state in Nigeria? But that is what the governors actively practice.
And we have an EFCC. We have anti-corruption
and they have immunity.
And the president is aware of that.
But the governors have immunity.
They do. They don't have immunity forever.
So that's the problem. But then when he goes, let the next regime take care of that. When the next government comes and begins to hunt them, what do you hear? Malkbe, you hear persecution. You hear political persecution. Because it's a new government, they are pursuing them for nothing.
Let me take this one. I mean, let's start with this one. The National Assembly oftentimes is considered the bastion of democracy. It's the major defining factor between an autocracy and a democracy. You have had cause to defend the powers of the National Assembly, but only recently, maybe not so recently, you've had run-ins with the National Assembly. Has it changed your perception of the National Assembly?
No, it has not. Just like I fight for you and defend you, if you also exceed your powers, I also oppose you. So I'm not doing it to please anybody. At the level of my training and learning and the height I've reached in a legal profession, I should be able to advise everybody. I was the same person that advised them when their powers were being usurped. I advised them, I said, look, they are robbing you of your powers. Go and take your powers. They said no. They refused for years. I said, go on. I wrote letters to them. They are robbing you. You are supposed to confirm this service chief. They said no. I went to court before court said yes. So if they are also exceeding their powers, I should be able to tell them too.
The question is, at what cost? How has it affected your work as minister?
Well, hey, I just need to do what is right.
I wanted to know what happened with the 774,000 jobs. Yes, we know that it went ahead. In fact, today it made the front page, the 774,000 jobs, as if they knew we were going to have this interview. There was an update about how that is being implemented now. What was the compromise first that you reached, and what's the situation, especially with payment of these people?
Well, we are going ahead to implement. We are paying, people, but those who are complaining are perhaps they have one problem or the other in their accounts. For me, the probity in the process is more important than just paying people and making people very happy. Because it comes under my purview, and it's under my purview, I make sure I give, clear directives to the agency to ensure that everybody is paid through the BVN. There will be no double payment. There will be no fraud in the system, and that we are sticking to that to the letter.
Some people
so those who
claim
are complaining,
that they're being paid cash.
They collect cash from the banks. When you say you've been paid cash, when you are credited, you can go and collect cash from the banks. That is what they mean by cash. Not that federal government pays them cash, no. When you say cash, it means that once you are credited, you can go to the bank, and then the bank will naturally pay you cash. You withdraw your money from the account. But the trail from the federal government to those accounts must be by electronic means and by BVN. That's what they mean.
Let's come back to where we were about constitutional amendment process. Now, many people are not happy with the results of what we have from how we have operated our constitution. Because some people will say at the end of the day, what people really clamor for, what they really need is development, is a positive impact on their lives. They want to be secure, they want to be free, they want to be able their children to be able to go to good schools and what have you. And it would seem that largely we have fallen far short of those kinds of standards. Maybe hence the very keen interest in the constitutional amendment process. Now, I don't know, you have already said that you do not see the Constitution as a hindrance. But if you were to look at, say, security today, would you consider the Constitution a hindrance to achieving basic security of lives and property, which is what government is meant for?
Like I said, I think it is very defeatist and easy for us to heap all the blames on the Constitution for areas where we are failing as a nation. Just like people heap everything on the president. It's easy to do so. But practically, when you come to the real analysis of it, perhaps that is not the problem. When you say security, the major issue about security, where they say the Constitution is failing, is that there is no power given to the governors, that we don't have state police, that the governors cannot be the final authority when it comes to controlling their commissioners of police, and then perhaps recruiting, training, and also operating the police forces in their different states. That is what the state police they're talking about. And so they want the Constitution to be amended to that effect. So is that why we are failing as a nation in terms of security? That is a lie. It's the same thing that people said over and over.
Why are we failing?
It's equipment, funds, and then, of course, having the different levels of government take on their responsibilities. You heard the president recently in his interview. And that is, maybe he did not make it as forcefully as he could make it, but he said it quietly too, in his characteristic manner, that look, there are different levels of government. If they give you money every month for security votes, what is security vote, Markwe? And they keep doing it. Because the federal government realizes that sitting here in Abuja, it cannot have intelligence at every unit of Nigeria regarding security situation. So you are giving that money for you to also push it down to local government level in order to gather security, equip the police, provide equipment
for the police.
Oh yes, that's why you see governments buying. They buy buses for police. They buy operational vehicles. They buy arms for the police.
They do it out of necessity.
So. No, but from security votes.
Indeed, out of security votes.
But they have security. If it's not their responsibility, then they should stop giving them security votes. Security votes has a wide bet.
Who gives them the security vote? Are they given, or they just generally take it from the state allocation and decide that this is what we're going to allocate to security from whatever comes to us?
But the system allowed it. People have gone to court. They have lost in court over this issue. Who gives them the right? It's been happening over the years. When national security is involved, everything is suspended until national security is addressed.
So how would you respond to those who think that increasingly free speech, because even before now, free speech a lot of people felt that they couldn't speak freely, especially in criticism of government.
Why? Who said so? Who has been arrested for free for speaking? It's all, look, listen, this is all complete balderdash, complete rubbish and nonsense.
Well, that's the program tonight. We want to hear from you as always. Please email us using the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Malpo Yusuf. Good night.